Welcome to another installment of the Sounds of ERA. My name is Edward Johnson, a.k.a. Eddie, and I'm the president of InfoEd International. We're going to be speaking today with Todd Swavely from the University of Pennsylvania. Todd began his involvement with ERA systems back in 1999, and currently he's the director of ERA systems there. Todd is going to speak to us today about his experiences with Grants.Gov's use of Adobe Forms as a proposal submission tool. He's also going to describe the effects of this on his university. Welcome, Todd.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Adobe Forms came out, and that was supposed to be the next step and supposed to make things that much better. What was your experience when they switched over to that tool for these grants?
Actually, our strategy at Penn was to mitigate that transition as best we could by starting to move to system in that same time frame. Rather than rebuild the infrastructure around using Adobe Forms and dealing with all the associated problems there, which we had to do but on a smaller scale, we were beginning our first efforts at system to system. And so we really emphasized that and tried to move investigators as quickly as we could to system, being that they had to learn a new tool for creating and delivering these proposals. So why not just do it one time and move to S2S rather than do this huge transition completely to Adobe Forms?
I know there was a lot of compatibility issues with the versions of Acrobat and Adobe tools because they would sign off on a certain version of it, and God forbid you upgrade because you could break the whole thing.
Right, and it got broken regularly. We have a campus, the number of investigators and the number of people who touch these applications. So you have a lot of installations, and thankfully Adobe installations were easier to deal with from a desktop support standpoint than Pure Edge was, certainly. The challenge was, of course, that Adobe Reader, like so many things, often has these automatic update settings, and if there's an automatic update, the new version of Reader comes out in your desktop and it brings in that new version of Reader, now you're suddenly incompatible with Grants.Gov. The truth is that problem still exists with Adobe Forms today. While the problem isn't nearly as critical as it once was, it certainly isn't here because of our predominant use of system to system, there are still version incompatibilities with Adobe Forms and certain Adobe tools, so it's still something that needs to be managed.
And I was just thinking back, as you talked about one of FDP's missions, try to consolidate the information that the agencies wanted to kind of look at that common component. And you brought up memories, even Pure Edge in the Adobe world, where there was like the 424 R&R set, but then the supplemental forms outnumbered the common forms 50-1. So, you'd have the NIH applications that would use 2 or 3 common forms, and you had all these supplemental forms. I remember looking at the metadata there, and there was probably, I don't want to exaggerate, must have been 300 different form sets, which on any one application, you were using 3 or 4 common ones.
Yeah, so the good news for us is that the numbers really favor NIH, and NIH has been very disciplined in the Grants.Gov world. In my opinion, they've been super easy to work with compared to many other agencies. They've really been very disciplined with their forms and their use of the forms. The people that they have preparing their FOAs are bright people and experienced people for the most part. So you have fewer problems where your FOAs have some bad combination of forms or incompatible situations. You just don't see that with NIH. We've been lucky in that we've been able to do a lot of submissions, whether they're Adobe Forms or whether they're S2S, with NIH with fewer problems than you have with other agencies. Now, we've evolved into doing a lot more submissions to other agencies using system to system, but it does have its challenges if you've never done an electronic submission with an agency before and you're not necessarily familiar with all of the, as you say, 300 forms that are out there and how they're used. Some agencies' inclination to repurpose fields is really a challenge too.
I remember one of the things that used to drive us nuts is they would deprecate forms, and they would say this version of the form as of this date is no longer being used. And then all of a sudden, one of these rogue agencies, and probably rogue is not the right word, would include one of those things inside their submission package. And you're like, wait a minute, we thought we let go of that form. They're like, well, we used it anyway.
Yeah, those are the kinds of things that are frustrating. I'm sure from a vendor standpoint, they must be quite frustrating. They certainly are from a user standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, because you're finding out that about that at 4:30 with a 5 o'clock deadline, and you're like, what's going on? So that wasn't fun.
This is the kind of thing that we try to encourage our investigators, and anybody who listens to this is going to say, oh yeah, getting investigators to be early for deadlines is a never-ending battle, and it truly is. These are the kinds of things that we try to say to them. You can do everything right. You look at this and you're providing the information that you're supposed to. All the ducks seem to be in a row. And when we deliver this, there's a possibility of problems. If we don't have time to find out that problem and resubmit through no fault of the investigator and no fault of the university's support infrastructure, it doesn't really matter. You failed to make the deadline, and that's truly not a place you want to be.
Fantastic information, Todd. I really appreciate you taking the time to go through this. Other things come up. I hope you're willing to explain those or engage us in those topics as they evolve over time.
No problem at all, Eddie.